Day 1252 of the Ukrainian war map, also known as the Russo-Ukrainian War. Juzzie here, and today is another update as I take a simplified and down-to-earth approach to some of the most important happenings on the ground in Ukraine. So starting off, we'll take a look at those Russian losses, as currently Russia sits on more than 1,051,000 military personnel losses, representing an additional 1,050 in the past day. Then as for hardware, 4 tanks, no APVs, 39 artillery, 1 rocket launcher, plus 1 air defense system. And now to the map, with a lot of fireworks to be seen today. Works of fire, that is to say, with large-scale Ukrainian one-way drone strikes launched overnight towards multiple regions, including the Rostov Oblast. Firstly, in the Orlovsky district, where just before the stroke of midnight, railway station and infrastructure were struck and engulfed in a wild blaze, which included the target of the Zhenaya electrical substation as part of a key rail line hit in the Orlovsky district. Following that event and closer to Ukraine at Misc in Rostov, with incoming reports of UAV activity in the key town, which serves to directly support Luhansk and Donetsk operations, with power outages reported in this location as well. Now beyond that, Rostov city and the outer hub of Salsk was reported to take on fire, with a training ground in Rostov and with a fuel train car that was hit at Salsk, leading to significant fires underway at the targeted Salsk railway yard location. Fires continued to blaze into the morning, with multiple delays experienced on this railway line due to the attacks, with railway operations at Salsk suspended, all as we see the AFU's drone campaign that is systematically targeting Russia's key southern rail corridor, which supplies the likes of Donetsk and Crimea, with Ukraine, who is clearly not letting up, with every railway hit that weakens Russian front lines, complicating their efforts to reinforce and supply their own forces into the SMO. And then with more of that type of activity to follow up as we move into the Ukrainian map, but firstly to Russia's Kharkiv opening, where, given the recent liquidation of the Russian commander Lebedev, who was in control of this latest Russian border incursion, units of the AFU's 6th advanced on the Russian flank near Cherniivka, with the AFU's 6th being those from the AFU's 6th Combined Arms Army. Now for these developments, it might sound controversial to say, but I would hope Russia retains at least some ground over the border here and inside of Ukraine, but done as a means to promote a false sense of security amongst their ranks, resulting in more of their forces being tied down in the north, funneling themselves into a state of exhaustion. Simply put, a psychological operation, aka a PSYOP. Then headed further down the map to both Luhansk and Donetsk, with more reports of Ukrainian UAV activity in both regions, and so to look at Makivka, which is northeast of the Donetsk city itself, as a railway junction and substation were targeted, with local residents reporting that a substation on the outskirts of Makivka was on fire. So we see Russia's chaos, which isn't just in the Donbas, but rather it's in their entire infrastructure, putting a massive and literal halt to their army's movements, as the restoration of substations can be tricky. Minor damage can halt operations for a few hours to a few days, but major damage to, say, a transformer can easily take several weeks to months. Now, as you might guess, prior to 2022, substation equipment within Russia was heavily reliant on Western imports, now sanctioned, eventually leading to Russia's need for import substitutions. But these changes have been slow on the uptick, hindering Russia's ability to quickly respond and replace components, resulting in prolonged recovery times and increased vulnerabilities in their electrical infrastructure. All of it is just not a good place for Russia to be in. Then on the map, and adjacent to this sector, on the edge of the Donetsk front, near Tolstoy, with clear indications of the invading forces longing to push to the westernmost edges of the Donetsk region, to neighboring Dnipropetrovsk. And as for the immediate future, Russian forces set on consolidating up to the river, the river line or lines, and where zooming in, it really pumps the brakes on an immediate taking of the settlement of Zelenyi High, not just because it's a light urban warfare environment that always slows location captures down, but also, in this case, because it's an almost impossibility to instantly go on the flank from the north over the water bodies to take the frontline settlement. And that's before they even get to the neighboring border to the north. And then, interestingly, for this front, taking a look at the changes below this point, as Russian forces, after their lull in activity at this location over the past few days, did actually throw their forces into the effort on the southern part of the axis at Voskresenka, which is really the only viable direction of movement for them, headed directly south, because the alternative would have been to go west from Shevchenko. But to zoom into that part of the map, it's quite remarkably a dead end. In fact, more broadly speaking, everything pushing west from this sector is just a mess of bridges, rivers, lakes, and difficult terrain for them. Then next up, and for this region and others, from August 1st, the Russian Federation will officially close 20 or so checkpoints on the border with Ukraine. According to a resolution of the Russian government, it's a curious move, as it will affect road and rail checkpoints throughout the north and east, with many of these checkpoints not even at the front lines, with some being rather far into Russia's rear, such as border crossing points on the internationally recognized borderline between occupied Luhansk and Donetsk, where they cross into Rostov, for example. The intent for this move could be for several reasons, including to funnel logistics into the right sectors for defensive and offensive operations, which is unlikely given it would put additional strain on Russian logistics unnecessarily. Not to mention the Russian MOD would have a handle on all of that activity anyway, so other reasons for this move may include to stop Ukrainian sabotage units' infiltration due to Russia's paranoia, and ever-increasing paranoia as it relates to these ongoing internal threats they face. Otherwise, Russia could be attempting to send a political signal by terminating the 1995 agreement between Ukraine and Russia on these checkpoint crossings, but Moscow is quite beyond getting any utility out of sending those types of political signals these days. And so, for one of the last remaining reasons, could indeed be that Russia sees this as a way to stop Russian soldiers from leaving the battle, putting everything into Ukraine and keeping it there. Sort of making a pressure cooker of Russian soldiers, if you will, as part of the Kremlin's attempts to maintain control and further prevent defections, attempting to bolster their positions as best they can. A reason like this would certainly align with the low morale of the Russian armed forces. Then to a quick look around the map, here being a better on-the-ground POV from the Russian angle on what amounts to yesterday's loss in Donetsk of the Russian TOS-1A heavy flamethrower system in flames, destroyed by a Ukrainian FPV drone strike. This is the one that fired off a volley close to the contact point and got caught during its attempts to withdraw to safer pastures. Then also in the east, Russian motorbiking, where she'll be coming around the corner when she comes, because as seen here, two Russian soldiers on motorbikes coming from opposite directions that crash into each other while driving on a field road, accepting only the risks of aerial threats they face from above, but you've gotta slow down on those corners. Military operations are inherently dangerous, and on this occasion it fits into the category of wartime operational losses, born out of exhausted and stressed out men who often make crippling or fatal mistakes with insufficient time to assess the situation. Then headed across to the news, where during a recent meeting with UK PM Starmer at the Trump Turnberry Golf Resort in Scotland, US President Donald Trump has issued a new ultimatum to Vladimir Putin, demanding negotiations to end the war in Ukraine within 10 to 12 days. This comes after a very official announcement from Trump a fortnight ago, giving the Russian leader 50 days to reach a ceasefire or peace negotiation settlement between Ukraine and Russia. But as expected, the Kremlin showed they had little intention of changing the course of the direction in their special military operation, leading Trump to now express further disappointment in the Russian leader, citing a lack of progress, failed ceasefire talks, and on remarks of Putin's continued missile strikes on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities, such as Odessa. Now, passing this renewed deadline could mean the US imposes additional sanctions and severe tariffs, it looks to be, on both Russia and its trading partners, as the measures would seek to further isolate Russia internationally. Ukrainian President Zelensky welcomed the renewed pressure, emphasizing that peace through strength is possible, while expressing hope that such measures could accelerate diplomatic efforts and bring a lasting resolution to the conflict. So with this renewed deadline now, if we can truly call it that, the stakes are higher, leaving little room for further inaction from Moscow. And yet, for this story, there's enough room to take the renewed deadline from Trump with a bit of a grain of salt, though it is still a notable announcement because, for a change, Trump actually has decreased his own previous specified timeline, rather than expanding it. Then to some more news, Ukraine marked a significant milestone in its energy diversification strategy by receiving its first ever gas shipment from Azerbaijan through the Trans-Balkan pipeline. This historic test delivery signals a strategic pivot away from reliance on Russian gas supplies. Now, Ukraine had already moved away from Russian gas, a shift that began after Russia's 2014 annexation of Crimea, but Ukraine's gas imports from several European countries for their own domestic consumption likely contained a portion of gas still originating from Russia. And so this new route via Azerbaijan isn't just a workaround, it's a strategic blow to Moscow's long-standing energy dominance. By unlocking a new non-Russian corridor for new gas flows, Ukraine isn't just securing its own supply, it's helping forge a new energy corridor for Europe, one that sidelines Russia and assists with rewriting the continent's energy future. Now to some Russian motherland news, where Kremlin officials continue to frame Russia as being in direct geopolitical confrontation with the West in order to generate domestic support for the war in Ukraine. For example, Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov's latest comments, where it's just best to quote him on this one, as he said, "We have a lot to do. The main of these things is, of course, to defeat the enemy. For the first time in history, Russia is fighting alone against the entire West. In the First World War, in the Second World War, we had allies. Now we have no allies on the battlefield. Weakness must not be allowed, neither weakness nor hesitation." Which is a statement that I suppose could be the Russian version of a motivational speech that is intent on galvanizing the population as a means to get full public support to throw themselves into a fully mobilized nation in wartime. But to point out a few things here, this latest narrative of fighting alone without the help of allies, omitting Iran and the hermit kingdom of North Korea, does cause a little bit of head scratching, not to mention if lapdog Lavrov's country was in a conventional war with the West, he'd already be gone a long time ago. So ultimately, it's going to take a lot more than this sad, sorry speech with defeatist undertones to get an overwhelming majority of support from the local Russian populace for a full military mobilization war against Ukraine. Then to a couple of quick Russian hardware update segments to round off the video today, two of them the same theme, and on the ever-evolving nature of Russian supply chains. The first is of a Russian motorbike carrying a measly 2 152mm artillery shells to the front lines by way of the latest in Russian two-wheel army endeavors. So much inefficiency. And the second, coming from a couple of days ago now, which could actually be a slight bump in supply chain management for Russian cargo movements, with a motorbike trailer attachment in this case, although given that this is carrying the bare essentials of water and potatoes, probably siphoned off Belarus, I'm guessing that this motorbike is engineered for proximity to the front lines, likely operating well within a range of say 10 to 20 kilometers, likely much closer, thereby nerfing this military supply-based category as it becomes slower and less agile increasing its exposure to the humble, or not so humble, Defender's wide array of frontline quadcopters available. Russia may as well stick with the man pulling the cart, which, seen here, they have a lot of that too. So that's it for today, guys. Thanks again for watching. Please continue to like and comment, and I do hope to see all of you guys there in the next one. Cheers!